come on in, take a seat. You don't want to sit next to me if I'm running it? My feelings are hurt. I don't need room. I've got you.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
We have a lovely shot of Brian, who is our host. Thank you, Brian, for hosting today.
There you go. Good. Yes, great. Just Brian Kearns, Vice President of the Human Resource Function at RRMC.
I'm sorry. No, Brian, your butt behind us. Now we've seen all of you.
My first request is next time we do this via Teams. This room is configured nicely for Teams, but we're thrilled to host the NAACP and many dignified guests. And RMC has a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a inclusive place to receive care and work. And so this is right along the partnership that we like to support. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Brian. All right, we are getting an echo, so I can imagine our friends online are getting a pretty intense echo. Let's try to take care of that. Is that it? Are we good? Oh, I still hear it. Okay, there we go. No, I still hear it. Okay. No? Is that going to be like that the whole time?
Well, that's our speak. That's our microphone, unfortunately.
Oh, is that mic on? We're good now? All right. Okay. We are good. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you here. I'm Tabitha Moore. I will be one of your co-facilitators. Eitan, do you want to say hello?
Good evening. I'm Eitan Nasreddin Longo, who works with Tabitha tonight.
Eitan and I have been working together for a few years, and this is not our first set of we call them Attorney General forums, but really they're the forums for a hate-free Vermont. This is our second time visiting Rutland. The first time was before the pandemic. And so when we got contacted by Jules Torney and Julio Thompson, who you'll meet in a minute, we were happy to jump back in because we always are looking for ways to provide forums and spaces for people to say what they need to say to the people who could potentially do something. Before we get too deep into things, the other entity that we really need to thank is the Rutland area branch of the NAACP. I am the criminal justice chair, but our illustrious president, Mia Schultz, is also here, and we are very grateful for her, Caitlin, and Lakia for making this happen today. Before we begin, even with introductions, we just wanted to make folks aware, although you could probably see if you're in the room, that we have a couple of our friends from the media here, and we very much appreciate them taking the time to focus on issues of hate and justice and injustice in our systems and what they can do. So we thank you for being here today. This is Chris, right? Chris, give a wave so the people on the camera. That's Chris. And Rachel is from WCAX, so PEG TV and WCAX. We've spoken with both Rachel and Chris, who are sensitive to the nature of this topic and how difficult it can be for folks to come and talk about personal things, painful things, hate crimes, and the like. And they're both committed, as their news outlets have typically very much been, to ensuring that people have a respectful experience of the media being here, that if you choose not to share on camera, that if you speak, if you raise your hand to say something, whether you're on Zoom or in the room and you say, I don't want to be on camera, that they will be respectful of that for you. If you want to be on camera, they might want some interviews afterward, or they might just want to grab a samosa and go home. But either way, they are here to spotlight this very important event where we are bringing together, again, the people who have the power to make systemic and structural changes that intersect with the issues that are covered by the Rutland area branch of the NAACP. So thank you both for being here. Is there anything that either of you wanted to say? Like, we're behind the camera, people. Tabitha, stop this. Okay. So we want to set the tone with a few things before we go into introductions. Eitan, should I do the multicultural guidelines? I'm gonna take that as a yes.
Sure, go ahead, go ahead.
So we just have a few community agreements that we like to make clear. Do you want to come into the circle? You don't have to sit back there.
Right here,
Get
come
up
sit next
in
to me.
here.
Come on over
You're
here.
like all by myself. Like, you are not ostracized. All right.
Hey, Tabitha,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I'm hearing that some people are not being able to input the audio very well. Do you know if there's a way we can improve our audio?
Unfortunately, the microphone's right here.
Yeah.
You want to come sit over here?
Yeah, I can move over there.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
All right. Just don't take my keys, okay? That 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee.
What do you drive?
I was just gonna give them to you so you
Yeah.
don't forget them.
Just if you take it for a spin and take it for a wash. Is this any better?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think so.
Excellent. Please tell me, thing number one, we want this to be accessible, so if anyone like myself are speaking too quickly, which I have a tendency to do, or you need a little clarity, please feel free to speak up, okay? And we'll make sure that we do that. So these community agreements are just a set of principles by which Eitan and I like to run the forums that we do. The first one is that we ask that people try on. You may hear things today that are antithetical, they're different from your own experience. We're not here to judge, we're not here to get into any debate on anything. The folks in the room just want to hear what we experience. And so to try on and to hear what people are saying can be an important part of learning something new. So we ask that you do that. Keep what you like, let go of the rest. You don't, like I said, there's not going to be a quiz at the end of this. Nobody is, going to make you swear your allegiance to anything. So please, just take what you can and leave the rest. In that spirit, we ask that folks kind of observe the Vegas rule. What people say here stays here. I mean, and I know we have our friends with the media, so we ask that we take the learning but leave the people's personal information and stories unless you get permission from them. That goes for our folks in our government offices, for participants, for anybody who's here. We just ask that you respect the fact that this can be really difficult for folks and they may not want everybody in the world to know their story, but this is one of the few places that people in marginalized positions may feel safe. The NAACP has existed for over 110 years and has been protecting people's rights. And I was really getting into it. Has been protecting people's rights and giving people access and platform for 110 years, and that trust is something that we take very seriously here, and so we want to make sure that everyone is kind of taking that up together. Like I said, we don't often come out because it's really hard to speak, especially in a place like Vermont, where it is so structurally white. And you feel like you're not heard very often, but you'll hear more about that later, okay? So it's okay to disagree. Like I said, this is not a place for debate. You don't have to debate anybody else's experience. We ask you to speak from your place of experience. We ask you to speak from your expertise, whatever that may be. That is also makes it less likely that people are going to try to argue. Let's see. We want you to be aware of both the intent and impact. Everybody in this room, I am coming to the table assuming that if you took the time to come here when we're still in a pandemic, first of all, thank you all for masking in the room, that you are committed to hearing about these or talking about this topic and that you want to learn more. That doesn't mean that sometimes we might say something harmful or ask a question that's harmful. And so Eitan and I will be mindful of what's going on, and we may ask folks, hey, can you step back, give some more space, or you know what, we're not going to continue down that line because that's hurting a group of people who's already been hurt. So be aware of your intent and your impact. We ask that you practice both and thinking. Maybe both things are true, right? Again, we're not here to solve the world's problems. We're here to get a better sense of what people in the Rutland area experience. You may notice that the content is going one way and the process is going another. We want our process and our content to both be respectful, which is one of the reasons that we ask folks to limit their speaking, if you're a community member, to 5 minutes at a time. We've asked our folks from the government agencies to limit their statements to 3 minutes, which may be difficult, but we're going to ask you to do it. And then if you feel like you need to go over time in order to answer the question that somebody from the community has asked, just say, hey, I know I'm going to go over. Does that work for everybody so that we can ask the room? Again, we want to step up, say what we need to say, and step back, but we also want to make sure people get the answers that they've asked for. Okay? We don't tolerate harmful or bad behavior. I don't expect that will be an issue in any of our forums. We were very lucky last time, had a really good experience, and so we expect the same today. The beautiful thing about the hybrid is that if somebody is acting up, Caitlin, our moderator, will silence or mute them. So we're not super worried about that. Before we begin, any other things we should know about? Or Eitan, did I miss anything?
I don't believe you did. No.
Are there any other?
You got everything we talked.
Okay. Norm.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
just one brief thing. I don't know if I'm the only person in the room, but I have a hearing loss. And if people could speak up, it would be very helpful. I had no trouble hearing Tabitha. Some of us have, and me included, drop my voice here and there. But if I just go like that, it's because I can't hear you.
Okay. So the signal for Norm, if he can't hear you, is a finger up, so folks can see that. And Norm, the reason I'm so good at this is because you trained me well.
Because I what?
You trained me well. You know what? You missed out, okay? All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and do introductions. We'll go, should we start in the room or online? Any preference?
Online.
Okay, we're going to start online, because they're like, we can see each other, we don't know who's there.
People, because right now we can only see ourselves.
All right, so we're going to be switching the views so that we can see, are we going to do the pinned view? Okay, so when you introduce yourself, we're going to ask that you give your name and your pronouns. And if you are an official or acting in an official capacity, that we ask that you give your role so people know who you are. So I will start, and then we'll bump it to Eitan. And then, Eitan, can you oversee the folks on the screen?
I can indeed.
Wonderful. So,
I will look at the screen. For the people who are on the screen, I will go through the list as I have it and call on you, and then please introduce yourselves.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm Tabitha. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them, and I'm your facilitator tonight.
I am Eitan Nasreddin Longo, and I use masculine binary pronouns, and I am the other facilitator this evening. Let's see. Gabriella Ferrari.
This is
Hi. Hi, this is Gabriela Ferrari. I'm the paralegal for the Civil Rights Unit, and I'm happy to be here and happy to see everyone.
Okay, and did you get to say your pronouns?
She and hers. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, folks, as you introduce yourself, if you want to just give us a preemptive, yay, I'm okay being recorded, or nay, I'm not about that life, that would be great.
Great. Michael Bilowski. And I may have butchered that, and I'm sorry.
I forgive myself.
Are you guys not able to unmute yourselves? Hold on, let me fix it, sorry. Okay, try again, sorry about that.
Go ahead, try again. Is that where we're at, Caitlin?
Yeah. Still not working?
Oh, hi,
Yay!
I'm Michael, a writer with True North Reports, and if anybody's going to say anything off the record, I hope that even though some rules were set at the beginning, if people just really state that before you say it and after you say it to avoid any conflicts in that regard. But yeah, I'm here to listen and just report what everybody says. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Catherine Thomas. What?
He's with True North.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear. Michael, you said you were with True North?
True North Reports, right? It's a
Okay.
small.
Yeah, I think I met you at a VSP event a while back. All right, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Catherine Thomas.
Hi, I'm an NAACP member and I live in Mount Tabor.
Great, thank you. Your pronouns?
She, her.
Thank you. Captain Kessler.
Hi there, I'm Barb Kessler with the Vermont State Police, and I am co-director of Fair and Impartial Policing, and my pronouns are she, he, hers.
Great. Andrew Todd, please.
Good evening, my name is Andy Todd. I'm here to listen in. My pronouns are he and him.
Great. Thank you. Jeff Maxwell. Jeff Maxwell. Can you unmute yourself and introduce yourself? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Jennifer Philo, perhaps?
No, you were correct, Tom. Thank you so much. It's Jennifer Philo. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I am the second vice president of the Rutland area branch of the NAACP. And I am A-OK with being recorded. My apologies for not being on camera. I have a defective camera on my laptop, so my apologies all.
Okay. Jonathan Goddard.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Goddard. I'm an investigator with the Attorney General's Office in the Civil Rights Unit. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm fine with being recorded. Thank you for hosting this event.
Let us try Jeff Maxwell once again. Jeff Maxwell. Okay, John McKenna, please.
Hi, my name is John McKenna. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the chair of the Economics Committee for the NAACP.
Great. Kay Jones, please.
I am Kay Jones, she and her. I'm an NAACP member, and I'm really excited that we're having this forum in Rutland.
Thank you. Mike Donahue.
Mike Donahue, Vermont News First. Thank you.
Your pronouns, perhaps, sir.
He and him.
Thank you.
Hey, Todd, I just wanted to remind folks that if they choose not to give their pronouns, that's fine too. We recognize that that is a risk for some folks. If you choose not to, then people will try to remember your name if they are going to refer to you. Or use they. Singular they. Thank you.
Tordis Isselhart.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tordis Isselhart. I'm down here in Bennington, member of NAACP. Bennington, where our wonderful Mia Schultz is based, and I love to keep up with what you guys are all doing and look forward to this also coming down to Bennington. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Pam Whitney.
Hi, yes, I'm a she, her, and there was a time when I was pre-puberty where people thought I was a boy, and I was okay with it for some reason. And I'm very curious about all this.
Okay, thank you. Shelly Fapos. Shelly Fapos. Okay. Oh, there you go.
So I'm Shelly Fapos. My pronouns are she, her, and I work for the Attorney General's Office in the Civil Rights Unit.
And forgive me for butchering your name.
It's okay.
Shirley Oskamp.
Hi, Shirley Oskamp, she, her, hers. I'm the co-chair of the Environmental Justice Committee for the Rutland area NAACP, and I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you. Fabienne Boisvert de Fazio.
Hi, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont.
Great. Thank you. Pat Bradley. Once again, Pat Bradley. Okay, moving on. Ronald Pulcher.
Yeah, good evening. Ron Pulcher, he, him, and I'm the Assistant Secretary. Sorry about that. Hold on.
And you're a very busy secretary.
Sorry about that. Assistant Secretary for the NAACP.
Thank you. Susanna Davis.
Hi, Susanna Davis, Executive Director of Activities for the State of Vermont. I apologize for the tech issues. I'm joining by phone. I use she series pronouns. I do consent to being recorded, but I will also try to remain quiet because I have a lot of opportunities to speak about things, and I want to center other folks in the community tonight. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. These last two are phone numbers. 802-252, that's the exchange of one of them. Does that person recognize themselves? Okay, moving on. The second phone number, 1202, meaning from Washington. Last four digits, 4684. All right. Tabitha, I throw it to you into the room.
All right, to my right, Melinda.
Thank you. Melinda Humphrey, Rutland, she, her. I consent to being recorded. I am Treasurer 2 for the Rutland area NAACP.
I'm Mia Schultz, she, her pronouns. I consent to being recorded. I am the President of the Rutland area NAACP.
Thank you. Just make sure to speak up because we still have our friends online. No, I know.
My name is Sean Pratt from Bennington. I do consent to be on film. Excuse me. Live in Bennington. I serve on the Criminal Justice Council, and my pronouns is he, him.
My name is Louis Scalaro. I'm a retired marketing executive, spending my twilight years trying to revitalize Rutland and the area to accept all peoples.
I'm Marcia Castle. I'm also a member of the Rutland branch of the NAACP. I'm also a mediator and a public school teacher. And I consent to be, and she, her, hers, and I consent to be recorded.
Hi, my name is Jean Butler. I'm a retired nurse. I'm just here to observe, and she, her for pronouns, and yes, it's fine to record. Thank you.
Evening, folks. Tim Leonard. I do community outreach for the Albany Field Office of the FBI.
I'm Lakia Batista Sanchez. My pronouns are she, her, and I am
Attention guests.
I'm sorry.
It is 6 p.m. and visiting hours are now over.
We can stay.
Please exit the building safely. Thank you, and have a good night.
Again, I'm Lakia Batista Sanchez, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the health chair for the Rutland area NAACP and now event coordinator. And I do consent to being recorded.
Brian Kearns, he, him, head of HR at RRMC, and fine with being recorded.
I'm Norman Cohen. I'm a retired attorney, a member of the NAACP. He, him is fine. I'm fine with recorded. I'm also being recorded. I'm also, together with Al Wakefield and Bob Harnish, involved in an equity, diversion, and inclusion project to get every municipality in the state to adopt it, and so far we have 62.
Hi everyone, my name is Erin Jacobson. I use she, her pronouns. I am an assistant attorney general with our office's Community Justice Division, and I consent to being recorded, though I'm really just here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Kate Getz. I go by she, her. I'm first and foremost an interested citizen, but I'm also here on behalf of Rutland County Restorative Justice Center, where I serve as pretrial services coordinator. And I am okay with being on camera.
Hi, my name is Maggie Ganguly. I'm the executive director of the Rutland County Restorative Justice Center. I'm also a citizen of Rutland. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm okay being recorded.
Hi, I'm Rich Byrne, he, him. I'm a member of the RRMC Diversity and Inclusion Steering Committee and a member of the NAACP.
You have a friend in the back. Why don't you come on in? The circle is meant for all of us. Yeah.
My name's Eric, Vermont resident, just here to listen, and I'm okay with being recorded.
I'm Ian Sullivan. I'm a prosecutor here in Rutland County, and I'm the acting state's attorney. The pronouns I use are he and him, and I'm okay being recorded.
I'm Bor Yang. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Human Rights Commission. I use she, her pronouns.
Good evening, Lisa Ryan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Vermont Law School, and I'm okay being recorded.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Karist. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the District of Vermont. My pronouns are he, him.
Hi, I'm Jules Torti, she, her. I'm the Civil Rights Coordinator and Civil Chief at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Vermont, and we'll explain what that is, I think, a little bit later for folks.
Good evening. I'm Suzanne Young, she, her, and I am the Vermont Attorney General.
My name is Clint Judd. I'm the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Albany FBI's field office, which also covers Vermont. He, him.
My name is Brian Jacob. I'm a supervisory special agent with the FBI. I'm also the program coordinator for our civil rights program. I'm he, him, and I'm okay being recorded.
Good evening, Jeff Hunter. I'm the supervisory special agent in charge of the Joint Terrorism Task Force for the Albany FBI, which is also responsible for Vermont, and he, him.
Julio Thompson, he, him pronouns. I'm director of the Civil Rights Unit in the Attorney General's Office.
My name is Sarah Ruane. I'm the Public Affairs Specialist for the FBI Albany Field Office. She, her. And if I wasn't okay with being recorded, I would need a different job, because that's my so go for it.
Okay, all right, well, we did it. All right, that's fantastic. We got through. I just remember that some of the folks online didn't say whether or not you consent, so just remember that before you speak, just to let folks know, do you consent to be being recorded? And if something happens and you end up saying, you know, like, oh wait, I didn't actually want that recorded, please make sure that you make folks aware of that so that our friends in the media can respect your privacy. Okay, we're almost there. Julio, so we were here a little over 2 years ago, and we did a series of forums around Vermont, and so Julio and Eitan are going to give us a little update about how what we learned before has influenced what we've been doing since, so that you have a sense of the impact of how your stories and your experiences actually do have influence on how folks respond. Do you want to go, or should we have Eitan go first?
I think Eitan can go first.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Well, one of my roles is to be the chair of the Racial Disparities in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Systems Advisory Panel, which is under the auspices of the Attorney General's office. One of the things that we have done over the past year, and that certainly for me and for other members of the panel that has been very inspiring, were these fora. And one of the things that has come out of that, and we're very excited by this, is what was at one point known as H 546, a bill that was relating to the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. Now, that may sound sort of remote from the concerns that were expressed here, 2-3 years ago, but it's not if you think that you actually need to have comprehensible data in order to inform policy changes. One of the things that had become clear was that among the different organs of the criminal and juvenile justice systems, there were data systems that were simply incompatible. They cannot speak with one another. It becomes thus very difficult to compile data. So what this bill, which has been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, is now Act, oh gosh, I can't remember, 146, I believe. It creates this division that will enable people to get their data together, as it were, and make some really good substantive policy decisions based on actual numbers. Not that we all need to have numbers in order to know that there are things that are wrong, but in order to get the legislature to move and to get state government to move, there do need to be numbers. We understood that and spent last summer writing a report to that end, and then shepherding with, oh gosh, Maxine Brad, Hal Holston, Martin DeLon, and Coach Christie, working with them to, in fact, create this bill. We spent last summer writing the report and helped to shepherd it through the legislature this year. So I do want to point that out. Anyway, Julio, do you want to take over now?
Sure. So in the Vermont Attorney General's office, we have a criminal division that can prosecute hate crimes. That's crimes that are motivated by bias against someone or a community because of who they are.
We want to speak up.
Okay. And we also have the ability to go into civil court, even if there's not an arrest, to get a court order to keep the perpetrator away from the victims, and also to assist the victims in receiving justice and any remedy that they can get from the court. When we did these fora in 2019, we weren't sure what we were going to hear from the community. We went there with an open mind, just trying to talk a little and listen a lot. And there were a few things that came out of those meetings that led to some changes in how we do our work, and also changes in state law. For the first thing I'll just say briefly is that after going through these sessions, and they were quite uncomfortable for a lot of people there, we really appreciated the bravery. It was very clear to us that in our office, when we were interacting with people who needed help, that we needed greater support and involvement with our victims advocate in our office, someone who's trained to deal with victims. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an expert in that, and our investigators are essentially civil detectives. They are not. So that was one thing, and it really changed how we did our business, so that we were much more trauma informed, much more open contact and welcoming contact. Another thing that we heard from the fora was that there was some confusion and perceived reluctance by law enforcement to become involved in something that seemed to the victim to be a hate crime because maybe there was another source of the conflict. So people were mad at each other for some reason, but race or something got in the mix. At the time, 2019, the standard for proving a hate crime was pretty high, just based on the way that the statute was passed in the early 1990s. And these fora informed, and then after I think a year delay because of COVID, in 2021, the legislature passed and the governor signed a change to the law that expressly recognized that a hate crime can happen if there are more than one reason for the conflict. So you have motives that are mixed, and that someone's race need not be the sole reason for an act of violence or even the predominant reason. And the idea was to make it easier for our office and our county partners, the state's attorney's offices, to take cases and provide more justice for victims. So that was a direct result of conversations that we had in Rutland and a few other counties. Another one, again, there were some delays with respect to COVID, was that there were concerns about victims that threats weren't directed at them, but directed at their family members. And Vermont's law at the time was pretty narrow. It was a threat directed at an individual. It wasn't really clear whether a threat towards someone else or a group of people would be covered by the law. And these four helped, and we offer testimony in support of expanding the breadth of that. So if it's a threat towards a third party or a group of people rather than one identified person, that could be chargeable, and it's consistent with the First Amendment. And so that was a strengthening of the law that our office supported and was ultimately enacted. And then finally, and there are others here in the room who I think, like Sean Pratt, for example, can talk to this, there were changes in the law that added for the Criminal Justice Council, which really trains and licenses our police, to have more members of the community in on the council so that it wasn't more, like a smaller group of law enforcement professionals, but included community voices. There's been a significant, I think, a broadening of perspectives by having that community element in that council, because the public, they are equal partners in public safety and public health, and so I think that was a really encouraging development that again was indirectly and partly directly related to these kinds of fora.
Good, thank you.
Sure.
So what you say makes a difference and it matters. And so we hope that you will step forward with the same bravery and willingness to share your stories and ask questions of the folks, like I said, that can make a difference. And the good thing about this is that you don't have to know exactly who you need to talk to because they're all here. So the person that needs to answer will answer you. So that being said, we're going to, because they want to hear from you, we have a few questions, and Caitlin, I'll send these to you so you can put them in the chat for folks. But really, we have some prompting questions so that if folks need them, if you see me on my phone, that's just because I'm co-facilitating from my phone. I'm not talking about anybody in the room. I'm just making sure that we're staying on time. So Caitlin's going to put the questions in the chat. If you have a different question or if you have a different story that you'd like to share, that's more important than following any script. So the questions for the folks in the room that we're kind of interested in, what's most pressing for you when it comes to creating a just community? What is getting in the way of creating a just community? What experiences are you having, either accessing services or just trying to live? And we know that in COVID, a lot of the disparities that we experience on the daily have become magnified, and that people who maybe even thought they were protected from a lot of things realized that they weren't. What experience have you had that you just want to share in general? What do you want to know about any of these offices and who they are and what they do and how they can help you? How are bias and hate impacting your life and your community? Things locally are really great for folks to know so they can know what's happening here in the Rutland area. What would you like for these offices to do? Is there anything that you would like them to do to become more accessible or to serve you better? Okay.
Before we jump into questions and maybe people have a moment to reflect, I did want to just give a short introduction of our office, because as the feds, we are not often as well known as the AGO, and I want people to know what we do so they might know what sorts of questions they can ask in this forum. Do you mind if I jump in with that?
Please do, Jules.
So, as Colo said, he's the U.S. Attorney for the state of Vermont. The U.S. Attorney's Office is really a federal analog to the
They can't hear you.
The U.S. Attorney's Office is a federal analog to the Attorney General's office in the state of Vermont. So just like Suzanne and her office enforce state law within Vermont, Colo and our office enforce federal law within the state of Vermont. And to do that, we work with the FBI, just like Suzanne's office works with the local and state police. We do a lot of the same things, but there are some areas of difference. We enforce laws pertaining to hate crimes, civil rights violations. Also have a focus, of course, on things that cross state lines, so domestic terrorism, cyber threats, cyber bullying and harassment. We also have a few kind of very specific statutes around police misconduct, things like the Derek Chauvin conviction. Those were federal prosecutions, or federal at least in nature in some ways. I think there might have also been a state prosecution there. So we do a lot of the same things and a little bit of the different things, but like Tabitha said, you don't really need to know who to call when something happens. We talk, Julio and I talk all the time, also at the Human Rights Commission, we talk all the time too. But I do like to highlight sometimes who we are and why we're a little different, because sometimes folks don't think like, oh, I'm being harassed online, there's someone that I can talk to about that. Not that you can't talk to the AGO, but you can certainly talk to us as well. And also, I know that things like white extremism, domestic terrorism are on a lot of folks' minds lately. They're on my minds. They're especially on the minds of the three men in the ties and the suits right here, and Sarah as well, who investigate these sorts of, investigate and track these sorts of issues. So I wanted to give that background in case it spurs anything folks were thinking about or wanting to express, or in case there are any questions of us.
Thanks, Jules.
Yeah.
I would say, just if it's okay, in that spirit, like I think at least for myself, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but how that process works with local law enforcement and trickles to you, because I find that there's a big gap of lack of understanding, education to know how law enforcement, local law enforcement works in conjunction with yourselves, or because it feels like there's a disconnect, at least in my experience.
Yeah, so we felt that disconnect too. I think Julio is actually probably the best equipped to answer this, because I think a system that his office has set up has helped grease the wheels of collaboration in this area. You want to jump in, Julio? I want to.
Sure. So part of the problem that we all start with is that in Vermont, as in 49 other states and the district, there are a lot of police departments. In communities, it's very fractured in the United States. 16,000 plus police departments in the U.S. That's state and local, and that's not including federal agencies. Vermont has about 83 or so, 80 plus. Plus we have 14 counties. Every county has its own elected prosecutor's office. We have the state police. We have other state law enforcement agencies. And then we have our federal partners, so FBI, DEA, Customs, Border Protection. And oftentimes, I mean, for a long time, all of us were more or less guilty of just focusing on our world and not talking to each other. And there's no law in Vermont that requires a state or local police department to contact the AG's office. So a number of years ago, really, and I think part of it was hearing from the community and the frustration that you're talking about. In 2019, our office, they're talking to our federal partners and the state's attorneys and police departments, asked them to participate in a voluntary program. It's not required. We call it the Bias Incident Reporting System. And the idea is that if an incident happens, someone calls the police about something. The old way of doing it is that if they take an incident report, they don't know who did it, the matter kind of stops right there unless there's more evidence that comes forward. We would never hear about it. Prosecutors might not hear about it. Certainly our federal partners, in many instances, would never hear about that. Or there'd be something where it was an act of bias, people are upset, but it's not a crime. It might be housing discrimination, But in the old model, the police department often didn't know to call BOR at the Human Rights Commission where they could get on the case and handle the matter in civil court. Or it could be something that was not a crime, not illegal at all, but was still upsetting to the community. People are hurting or they're scared in the community, and people don't know about it. And that, we thought that was a problem. And so we asked the state's attorney's offices to work with their local police department. So every time there's an incident that comes to their attention, that they provide, if they do an incident report or something, they notify our office. And our office in the Civil Rights Unit, we would act as a clearinghouse so that if something happens, someone's house is vandalized, for a local police department would notify our office or the state's attorney's office, and then we would give the heads up to our federal partners, because maybe they don't know who did it, but there might be in a different county a very similar crime where they know who did do it. And so part of the job is to try to connect those dots so that we all know what we're doing, and also so that we're not stepping over each other's investigations. We wanted to avoid situations where detectives from, investigators from this agency are knocking on doors trying to figure out who did it, and then investigators from another agency are trying to do the same thing, right? So we try to work together and collaboratively. And also for the cases where it's not going to go to court because of this hateful act or series of acts are causing conflict but not breaking any laws. One thing we learned from the Rutland Forum in particular was that we needed to learn a lot more about restorative justice centers and community justice, because we found over time that many of the conflicts that we got, a lot of the calls, crime hadn't happened. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we can be better at it. We'd love to hear how to be better at it, but that's something we've been doing.
Thank you, Julio.
Sure.
And you'll hear my timer go off. That means that they usually have about 15 seconds to go. So we have a request to have other offices just give a 2 to 3 minute overview of what you do. But I wanted to echo Mia's point that what happens over here is a mystery for folks and how you work together. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. So whoever wants to go next, whatever office wants to go next, you've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So again, Jeff Hunter from the Albany FBI office. I oversee our Joint Terrorism Task Force, and we are also responsible for all of Vermont as well, just like all of my colleagues from the Albany office. So generally speaking, of interest to this group, probably of most interest to this group, my unit investigates racially motivated violent extremism and anti-government, anti-authority crimes. We also are responsible for international terrorism, but I think for the focus of tonight, and if people have questions on the international terrorism side, I'd be happy to answer them, but keeping to my 3 minutes, I'll stay on the racially motivated violent extremist and anti-government, anti-authority side of the House. So I think maybe just a couple key points before I turn it over to my colleague. We don't investigate groups, domestic terrorism groups. We investigate individuals. And there's generally a three-pronged test that we put towards an individual situation, and that is, does the person have an ideology? Is there an act of violence or a threat of violence? And is there a federal statute? Are they potentially breaking a federal law? So that's it's called the domestic terrorism triangle. That's what we call it. And if you can hit all of the points of the triangle, you have potentially a domestic terrorism investigation. So we look at individuals, as hateful as certain speech can be. Speech alone may not hit all of those triangles from the domestic terrorism side of the House. We use federal criminal statute, in partnership with our colleagues over at the U.S. Attorney's Office to kind of action those cases. I think what I would say in closing, and then obviously as we have these discussions, happy to answer any specific questions that folks have. We can have all the fancy tools in the world, and I've been with the FBI for over 20 years. I've worked in the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and all across the United States. And with all the fancy tools and technology, there's still kind of one thing that makes us the most effective law enforcement agency in the world, not just the United States, and that's having the trust of the public. Without the trust of the public, all of those fancy tools and techniques and gadgets, they're nowhere near as helpful as public trust. And I see that around the world where law enforcement agencies and governments aren't trusted. And so maintaining that trust and having forums like this and ensuring that everybody in this room and all the citizens of Vermont are comfortable with their federal law enforcement. We work for you. So with that, we can be effective and keep everybody safe and accomplish our mission. So I'll leave it at that for my 3 minutes, but look forward to more dialogue tonight.
Excellent timing. Thank you.
And my name is Brian Jacob again. I run our civil rights program for the FBI in Albany, which covers Vermont. The civil rights program is broken into 3 parts. Our first is Color of Law, which investigates police misconduct. We primarily see that in the prison systems, corrections officers. That's the majority of our investigations. The second part is hate crimes, which we can discuss further. And then the third part is what we call FACE Act, or Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances. And that is especially current right now with recent Supreme Court rulings on abortion. So that's the 3 parts of the Civil Rights Program. Have any of you heard of the FBI's Crime Data Explorer? So the Crime Data Explorer is available online. You can go Google it. And it has stats for hate crimes across the country. And you can filter the statistics to find your state and your specific police department as to how many hate crimes they report to the federal government. So in 2020 is the last year that data is available. The state of Vermont had 60 reported hate crimes that the FBI is aware of. So if you folks believe that's an accurate number, it's an accurate number. But our message has been and continues to be, we don't think that's an accurate number. So we request your help in trying to help those vulnerable populations get to us or get to a law enforcement agency so that we can appropriately report it and get the data accurate, and then we can conduct our investigations after that. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. There's plenty of time left, too. All right. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I have recently discovered with Lieutenant Kessler now, is that we have an issue where one of the questions that sometimes our law enforcement officers will ask is, do you think this is motivated by hate to the victim? And sometimes in cases where, I had a case where there was a child of color living with a white adult who was not related to them, and because it was the white adult's property, and they didn't know. They were like, no, even though it was very clearly motivated by hate. So when officers are relying on people to tell them whether they think it was motivated by hate, so that was dropped. It wasn't reported as a hate crime anywhere. So that's one of the issues that we find. So when you ask, we know the data are wrong or low, there's a lot of holes in the system that are making it that way, but we're trying. All right, enough about me. Anybody want to go?
Oh, cool. I spoke before.
Okay, sure. Again, I'm Nicholas Karist. I'm the U.S. Attorney for Vermont, which means I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state of Vermont. I get to work with Jules and our partners at the FBI and state and local law enforcement enforcing federal law in Vermont. Focusing on our civil rights program, Jules described most of it. There's both civil component to it and criminal component, just like the AG's office, and we work with our partners at the FBI, particularly on the criminal components. Those are color of law violations, like you heard about before, which usually involve or do involve anybody in their official position using that power to deprive somebody of their rights. And then we also work on hate crimes and other kinds of civil rights violations. On the civil side, we work on anti-discrimination cases. That's when somebody discriminates against you in your job, at school, in any kind of public public environment because of your identity. So those are in broad strokes, those are the areas that we work on in civil rights. As you've heard before, the most important thing is that you let us know what you are experiencing, whether you let Julio's office know, or you let our office know through Jules, or you contact the FBI. The knowledge for us is our power to be able to help if we can. We do have specialized tools. We can't always fix every situation, but if we don't know about what's going on, we can step in and try to help. So if there's one thing that I would ask that people take away from this, it's that share what you're comfortable sharing. Contact your law enforcement partners to try to share your experiences, and we will try to help if we can. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Do you two want to go? No, Lisa.
I got a comment, actually.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right, that's what we want.
I appreciate the perspective of building trust with the community and in the communities, and both of you spoke to that. And I just want to make a comment that I do find it concerning that we're sitting here in Rutland and there's not one local law enforcement officer from a local agency represented. So I think just that you can't build trust if you don't see the people and there's no relationships. And I just wanted to reflect that thought.
I'm just going to say to that end, some of the disconnect that we were talking about before is for that very reason. We have police officers or police departments who aren't necessarily trained to recognize hate or bias in the way that you guys are explaining. And it doesn't necessarily trickle down to you or trickle up or whatever direction that goes. And so having them present at this kind of forum or this kind of, and I know that you may have tried to do that, but is important to the conversation as well. So I'll just reiterate.
And I think a lot of the forums that they do go to are forums in which, they're able to latch on to what we're trying to do in terms of letting them know, like, these things are going on. And a lot of times they don't listen to the advocates at all. You get blocked a lot. I'm dealing with 2 situations right now in Brattleboro, so.
I'm a creative guy, and when I sit around people with credentials like you have, and specificity that you can talk from, I mean, it turns out I don't know where to begin, but let me put in an input that might be that has specificity, and it has a very importance, a tremendous importance to the state. The DEI, the state has a dire problem creating, it has to bring young people in here. If we don't bring young people into our state, we face a very dire economic future. DEI, diversity, inclusion, and so forth, is a big benefit for the younger generation to come to the state. There are other things, but it's a major benefit. It has to be part of our package of values, and it has to be projected in our image. Okay, but what I see, and here's my input on what I see, is that we have a tendency in the state to try to solve new problems with old ideas. The thing that Einstein said, you can't solve new problems with old ideas. Everything we do, everything each one of you do, each one of the commercial people do, the governor, I don't care who he is, has to think transformatively. It has to be a little risky. It can't be what it used to be. It can't be what everybody else is doing. It can't be what everybody did traditionally. It didn't work. What we have to do is transformative thinking. If we don't think transformatively in all the responsibilities you have and all the responsibility everybody has, we're not gonna fulfill, the state is not going to bring people in, and we're in for a dire situation. Again, the diversity part of it and the equity part of it is a major part of what we have to do. So you're sitting on something that has great specificity and great economic value, also not only social value, to the state. Because without that thinking, so the bottom line is, you gotta take your thinking to one step level. Keep thinking about it, keep thinking about it. If you don't feel a little gut feeling, or you feel a little risk, or you don't feel that, geez, that's strange, your biases come up, then it's not a good idea. Keep thinking, and there's ways of doing it. And that's my general input to a specific problem.
Thank you, sir. Do you mind? Mine slips down when I talk too, especially when I get going. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Before I talk, can I ask you, Julio, to maybe define for everybody what a hate crime is? Because I think we've heard a lot about civil versus criminal, but I think it might be helpful to have that definition, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. So in Vermont, you need to have a criminal act under, violation of a criminal law before you can have a hate crime. So first element is there a criminal act? That could be an assault, it could be vandalism, any number of, it could be a criminal threat, but it has to be a crime. And under the laws, it's now been expanded. It's a crime or an attempt to commit a crime that's motivated entirely or in part by someone's bias against the victim's actual or perceived membership in a particular group or of a particular race. So if someone is being attacked or harmed because the perpetrator thinks they're Jewish, but they're not, but it's anti-Semitism that's motivating the crime, the assault, then it's a hate crime. We hear the phrase a lot, hate speech. That's not really a legal term under Vermont or federal law. It's a phrase we use in our conversations about speech that's hateful. But in many instances, hateful statements are not crimes. Threats can be crimes, but lots of ugly speech is not. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to hear that, because I think maybe for some people it can be confusing about how do you hold people accountable for hate, because hate shows up in many different forms. And when we're thinking about hate crimes, it's really about holding people, like punishing them, sending them to jail, or maybe fining them, or sending them to prison. There's a different kind of accountability when people hate us too, or engage in hate against us on the basis of our race, or national origin, or disability, or any of those, or sexual orientation or gender identity. And that accountability is sometimes money, but sometimes that accountability is, I need that housing, or sometimes that accountability is, I need that job, and you didn't give me that job because of my race or whatever. And that's also an extremely important sense of accountability that our community needs. At the Human Rights Commission, we investigate the claims of discrimination in 3 areas: state government, employment. Julio's office investigates them in all other areas of employment. We do, if you work for the state and you have experienced discrimination, you would come to the Human Rights Commission. In addition to that, we cover housing. So landlords who deny you housing because of your race, or because you have children, or because you're receiving public assistance, because you have a disability, because you have an assistance animal, those things would come to us. You make a request for a reasonable accommodation because of your disability to your landlord, and your landlord says, I'm not going to renew your lease because I'm really sick and tired of these requests. That's retaliation. You get to come to the Human Rights Commission and have those claims investigated. But in addition to that, the Human Rights Commission also investigates claims of discrimination in what we call places of public accommodations. And in Vermont, we get to enjoy a very huge definition of what places of accommodations mean. It includes hospitals, like where we are currently. It includes schools. It includes roads. It includes law enforcement. And so that's a huge spectrum. And so when people experience discrimination in those places, they can come to the Human Rights Commission for an investigation. And that's a different form of accountability for hate as well.
I have this pyramid that Julio knows I'm obsessed with, that I feel like might illustrate a little bit what Bora's talking about. So this is obviously a really silly pyramid I drew on a piece of notebook paper, but when we talk about bias incidents, Julio and I and Bora often talk about this pyramid where like everything that happens.
Oh, it's just a pyramid.
So everything that happens in the pyramid is something hateful that happens to somebody. People often say, oh, a hate crime happened to me. And legally, oftentimes it doesn't meet our definition of a hate crime. Hate crimes are really serious, but there are few of them relatively. In the middle here is exactly what Bart was talking about. It's legal accountability, but in a different way. You know, you get your house, you keep your house, or you get some money, civil accountability. And here down at the bottom is most of what we see, which is either First Amendment protected behavior like speech, or just something that doesn't, it's crappy, but it doesn't violate any law. And this is where community response comes in. A lot of time people, I think, legitimately feel upset that the law doesn't address everything bad that happens, but it absolutely doesn't, but it doesn't make it any less bad or any less hateful or any less valid. So we can talk about things in this part of the pyramid too. You know, from our perspective in law enforcement, you know, we enforce civil and criminal statutes, but it's no one else's responsibility to know where something falls in this pyramid than ours. And so we want to hear about all of the things that happen, and we can help you sort through what part of the pyramid it falls into. You know, I'm concerned, Mia, when you say something happens and we don't think it trickles to you. I think you're probably right, and our best method of hearing stuff is from local law enforcement. And if that's not happening in a community, you know, I would love to hear other ways that, you know, you could obviously call me, right? You could call Julio, you can call Bor, but what other ways are there to help us hear about these things? Because, you know, I think with our careers, what we're trying to do is hear about things and try to make them better. And if we don't hear about them, we can't. It's not, onus is not on people to get the message to us, but I'm interested to hear ideas about how it can happen because we're not the experts on that.
I mean, the fact, again, going back to that we don't have the local law enforcement here in this space either, like in this right now, and really when they feel the sense of like, I've tried to be like, let's see what the AG's office or let's see if it's safe, let's see if we can go to them. But a lot of people feel if they go beyond or above the local law enforcement, there would be retaliation in those cases too. So, and a lot of people, you know, at least in my experience, don't feel really comfortable or don't trust this process and that anything will necessarily come from this, and that their trauma will have to they have to re-experience their trauma over and over again, and therefore they don't want to go through that process anymore. So we have to figure out ways to really make it a safe process from the bottom, which is local, right? Well, you know, not to call them the bottom of the, but the first point of contact to you all. So yeah, that's why we gotta continue having these conversations that I'm having.
I think that when there's a disconnect between community members and government agencies and entities, it's partly to do with the fact that the people that are in these agencies may somewhat be disconnected and there isn't that kind of connection that we've mentioned and talked about. But the other disconnect, which I really love, Jules, you drew the pyramid and the lines, is that those lines really don't reflect what community members actually experience. So that the line for the difference between discrimination and what people are really, that is what we know is microaggressions and a lot of bad stuff that's happening, is that that line should probably be moved higher. Or that the line between discrimination and hate crimes should change somewhat. And Julio talked about how some of those lines have changed. The lines are malleable. And the benefit of hearing from community members is that it gives us a chance to sort of advocate for changing those lines as well. And I think that's really important.
I want to give folks online a chance. So if anyone online would like to speak, you can either raise your hand or do they have the capacity to unmute themselves, Caitlin?
Yep, they should.
They do.
There we go.
Yes, what is that, 202, 802, whatever that number is?
Yeah, 802, ending with 2595.
And like I said, remember that if you don't want to be recorded, make sure you say that. If you're fine being recorded, just say that as well.
Okay, I think I'm the lucky caller whose number you just called out. This is Susanna.
Oh, hey.
Oh.
I thought you sound surprised. Should I be quiet?
No. I just didn't recognize the number and I should have. Never mind.
Thank you. I thought I would jump in and say a little bit about the Racial Equity Office as well, because I think that it's a piece that often gets intertwined with a lot of the offices we've heard from so far. So the Racial Equity Office, and I'm not going to go into the deep background of how it was created, although that information is on the website if anybody here is interested. But in essence, we at the Racial Equity Office often get calls about a lot of the issues that we're discussing here now. And a big point of confusion is who handles what, who can I go to, what does this office actually do? And you know, the truth is that it doesn't feel like it anymore, but it is sort of a little bit of a new part of state government. It was only created 3 years ago, and for that reason, I think that a lot of what this office can do is still to be figured out and determined, and you know, we're feeling our way through. This office is empowered to receive complaints, to receive inquiries, to receive issues that people come with, and also a lot of what we do here often is handled by the offices that you've already heard from. And so where we have tended to carve out a role, and because you all are sitting in a health facility right now, I'm going to use this analogy. I tend to think of our office in contrast to some of the other places that you've heard from, like, let's say, the Human Rights Commission. I think of the Human Rights Commission's work a little bit like treatment, and the Office of Racial Equity's work like prevention, in the sense that, the people you've heard from tonight so far often will intervene or respond when an incident has happened or when an incident is about to happen. Whereas the Racial Equity Office, its main purpose is to work within state government to make sure that state government is not perpetuating systemic racism. And so what that means is, our perspective is, hey, if there's an incident that happened, what can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again within our power as state government? And it's difficult, and it's often very frustrating, because there's a lot of times that we want to intervene, and we may not have jurisdiction, we may not have authority. I can't force a local law enforcement agent to do something or not do something. Technically, they don't even have to pick up the phone if I call them, depending on the topic. If it's about data, then yeah, you need to talk to me. But otherwise, a lot of our interaction has to be voluntary. Same thing with schools. I get reports all the time of things that are happening or not happening in schools. And because of the decentralized education system we have, it can be really difficult to address them from within state government. And that's why for us, a huge part of this is getting local level government on board and to step up and do the parts of the work that they only can uniquely do to be able to close that gap. So I could go on, I don't want to though. I think I'm at my 3 minutes, so I'll pause there, but I just wanted to add that to the mix, that we're kind of also in a funky place here.
Thank you, Susanna. You actually had 12 more seconds.
I will reserve them for next time.
Reclaim your time.
So I'm happy to introduce the work that my office does, but I don't want to cut into the comments.
Please, no, we've still got another 40 minutes, so speak loudly and tell everyone who you are.
So local, the bottom, I guess, however folks want to phrase it. So I'm from the state's attorney's office here in Rutland County. We are kind of the direct courthouse side of law enforcement. Not offices nearly as big as the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Attorney General's office, but we are usually the first point of prosecution. We're usually the first point of prosecution. I was here for the forum at Rutland High School, and I'm very happy to be here again. I think one of the most important things that those who are in a public service role can do is listen. And I certainly heard our colleagues ask for people to report, but I think one of the questions we should be asking is what barriers exist to reporting? Because surely problems exist, and it's not like people are sitting at home thinking, well, this problem exists and I don't want anything to change. That can't be true. So that means almost certainly that there are barriers to reporting so that those of us in public service aren't able to start working on the problems. And so we should be looking at how to take down those barriers so that reports get to where they can be acted on. And I'm Ian. I said that before, but I'm the local person.
Thank you, Ian, the local person. And I would respond to that by saying I have tried to help people who gave up with the paperwork.
Yep.
That just filling out the form, first of all, they have to print it, right? Or whatever the issue is, they're like, I'm done. They give up with the paperwork alone. So how can we make it accessible to people, who are traumatized, who doesn't have the capacity to fill out the paperwork? Other folks have responses to what gets in the way of accessing or reporting or getting the information where these folks would like it to go. Or you can just tell your own story in general if that's what you'd like to do.
Would you mind if I gave a plug for the FBI's reporting system?
Please give it a plug for the FBI's reporting system.
So we have something known as the National Threat Operations Center. And if you are uncomfortable, you don't feel like you can report something, in the National Threat Operations Center, you can go online, you can shoot them an email saying, here's what I think has occurred. You can provide them a contact number to get back to you. You don't have to provide them a contact number. If you don't have access to email, you can actually call the hotline, which we can provide to you. I don't have it on me right now, but it's a national hotline, and they will type it up for you. So you can just give them a call, you tell them exactly what occurred. They will route that threat to whatever office it's supposed to go to across the United States. Then we will dual route it between the FBI and our different prosecution offices and our state and local partners. So that is another option if people are afraid to go into the local police department.
Excellent. Well, I just sent Caitlin some info to add to the chat for folks about the National Threat Operations Center. So
thank you.
And I believe that number is 1-800-CALL-FBI, is that right?
It is.
I was going to ask if that was the number. So it's 1-800-CALL-FBI.
And actually, you don't even need to send an email. You can go to tips.fbi.gov, and I believe that serves as you don't have to send an email. That's the tip.
That's awesome. I'll give that to Caitlin as well to put in the chat for folks there. So, folks from the community, what's moving you right now? What would you like them to know?
Mary Brown.
Oh, Mary Brown, thank you.
Mary Brown, yeah.
This question may have been addressed before, so forgive me. Is there whatever town you live in, usually you see a listing of fire department, police department, etc. Do the police have this type of a poster or some information so that if anyone does take that first step and contacts the police, that all of the local police departments have these contact names, emails, telephone numbers for discrimination, hate crime, or harassment, whatever the case may be?
So this is Julio Thompson from the Attorney General's office. For that bias incident reporting system I talked about earlier, where we share information about acts of hate in the community, whether they're against the law or not. When we launched the system, we created a one-page fact sheet for police departments to put in their dispatch centers. to break down the different types of calls that they might get, and then to give the contact number and email address for our office, as well as the headquarters for the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. And we have a similar one that we circulated to the county prosecutor's office. I think there are some departments that are quite good at it. We hear a lot from some departments, I think, not because there's an unusually high level of hate in that community, but because they found it so helpful to partner up with us, or for us to find them a restorative justice or community justice professional who might be able to help them resolve cases where they're not in a position to arrest someone. So we have provided that. We also train it at the police academy. All police officers have to be trained in hate crimes, and the AG's office teaches the hate crimes class, and we talk about this system and remind them that all they have to do, if they don't know what to do about it, is to call one of us, and then we'll take care of calling the right people and make sure it lands in the right hands.
Thank you very much.
My feeling is that the purpose of this, as I'm getting at, the purpose of this is bringing all these experts in, people who are making the laws and can change the system. But what's missing, it doesn't bother you, but I think other than the people there, I'm the only person who has no authority or is involved in an organization. I'm the only citizen that you all relate to. And they're not here. It says to me, where's the interest? If we're going to move them, if we're going to move people to respond to what's right, what's socially right, what's just right, we're going to have to get, we have to do mechanisms like this, the organization, but more related to driving their opinions. For example, if I was to do this and I wanted to do that, I would take several of your people to our panel. I'd bring in citizens and let them bang away at you. You can answer the questions and you'll learn. You'll learn to be a lot of complaints, but you'll learn from those complaints to adapt and so forth and to be more transformative. It bothers me to sit here, and I don't know what's over there, but I'm the only person that doesn't have a sense of responsibility in an organization, the FBI, whatever the case might be. There should be more of me, I think. Maybe not for you, but I think. If we're going to move people who have learned, who have been educated, learn from children to be biased or prejudiced, we're going to move those people. We have to get them more involved. Instead of looking at us all saying, well, you guys don't know what I think, you're punishing me, which I think is that's what I'm saying. We have to start thinking about doing it in a new, different way, a transformative way. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Norman Cohen, and I too am a private citizen. You're not the only.
Okay. Two of us.
I'm just teasing.
Well, there's also a bunch of people online that you can't see.
Hopefully.
We have
I would like to say,
23.
I would like to say that I'm a private citizen.
I
The NAACP is a volunteer organization. I'm here, I'm not getting paid to be here.
No.
I'm there here, and I'm also a person of color who has challenges in my community. So I would like to say I am here. So is several other people here.
Yeah.
They may have dual roles. So
We care so much that we keep showing up for free.
I want to, in a sense, I was teasing Lou about being a private citizen. I have the sense, first of all, I'm impressed with all the resources and your ability to articulate it and taking the time to come from all over the state and the region to come here. It's wonderful. But I do get the sense here that we're preaching to the choir. Yes, there are a few people from the NAACP, including me, and Mia, and a few others. But we're not talking to the grassroots here. We're talking to people that understand the issues. And I would like to see you folks, you can't do it tonight, but get together and get some sort of plan to get this message out and get these resources out to the people who are more affected than most of us here. Get it to the street. You're not going to make those plans today. Get to the various police departments and say, can we help you get a person of color on your staff so that there's better understanding? How can we do that? That's just one example. And there are others, but this is wonderful, it's informative. Nice to see some people I've met before and haven't seen for a while, but news right, in my view.
Thank you. Rich.
Following up on what Norma said, and what Lisa mentioned, the lack of local law enforcement is really pretty bad. Some of the friends I have who live in Rutland, people of color are afraid to call the police because calling the police can be a life-threatening situation, and even if they're as victims of crime. And I'm wondering what the higher levels of law enforcement can do to help educate local law enforcement on their responsibility to every citizen.
And I'm gonna piggyback off that a little bit. When you go to law enforcement, when you tell them these problems and you tell them the things that's going on. Oh, when you go to law enforcement and you tell law enforcement what's going on, they don't do anything. Right, most of the fact they don't believe me, and there's a situation up in Burlington about 3 years ago. There's 2 missing bodies in Vermont that nobody can account for. Okay, when I look at that list, I see Mike Donahue on there, and he understands what that is. He understands what I'm talking about. Right? You got people telling, they said the kid jumped off the bridge and landed in Lake Champlain, and they just can't find his body. And I'm just thinking to myself, if it was anybody else that was of some importance, they would find something. Because you have people right now that's waiting for this kid's body, and they're afraid to talk to you guys, man. No, they can't have a funeral for their loved one. You know what I'm saying? That's real. And law enforcement, local law enforcement, all throughout this state, they're not doing enough. You guys are not doing enough. Y'all got to do more. We're going to keep having these conversations, but where is it going to take us? When are y'all going to do something? 2 bodies. Where was the other one? In St. Johnsbury. Nobody can find them. The 2 people that was with them last, they don't question them. They just let them free. Another guy in Brattleboro, shot. Just because a guy owed him money and the police don't do nothing. They let the guy free. He's walking around. What are we talking about here? So now what happens when these black men go and get their weapons and to be able to protect themselves? You're going to be there to arrest them, right? And with all the things that happen in this country with black men and with how drugs was pimped on them, right? They still follow us the way that they follow us. But why don't you follow the white supremacists that way? You know that they're out there. Why don't they get followed? Why don't they get the harassment that black men get? Or black people? So this is serious, y'all, because it's about to turn into a war. These guys ain't gonna let these guys just do whatever they want. I got one guy who got his car spray painted. And he walking around with his gun. I got to convince him, put that away. What you want me to do? Y'all got to start doing something, man, and that's it.
Got suggestions?
Well, I think one of the things that happens is that people like Sean, who serve as intermediaries, who try to keep the peace, are essentially tap dancing while the process is working itself out. The process takes so long. I mean, this is a different type of discrimination, but, Julia and I dealt with a case with a young person who was fired because they got COVID. That was in January or February. It was kicked to Boston, they were told it would be 6 months. Here we are sitting on 7 months. The person's like, what? You know, so there's this thing that happens while you're working on it that leaves people like us who are advocates, activists, trying to work between systems completely without any sort of credibility, without any resources, as we're trying to keep the peace in the streets or wherever it may be, or trying to convince people that what you're going to do is going to help them. But then nothing happens. Or what happens is too late, or what happens is not enough. And so if the system can come up with ways to help advocates, to help people through those moments, you know, one victim's advocate is a fantastic thing. And there are gray areas that Sean works in that a victim's advocate can't deal with. And that's a problem.
I would also add that there's the examples that are set. We see it. We see what happened in Bennington with the white nationalists there, and how long drawn out that process, years, like literally finally got actually charged with a hate crime, and then it was being used as a pawn for pleading out, right? So it was being dangled as like bait. Like if we will give you a break and take off the hate crime if you agree to this plea bargain, right? So what example does that set for the rest of the community? That there's going to be a long process, that there may be an argument back and forth, you're going to be exposed. We have people who just leave town, right? Tabitha has said, many of us have said over and over again, that this state is not, you know, majority 98% white on accident, right? They just leave town because they know that this process, they have seen this process take time to prove, basically. And there's this lack of belief that we were talking about, and lack of action. And again, putting people like myself, people like Tabitha, people like Sean in these predicaments where we can't, like, I actually preface almost every conversation like, I hope you are not gonna get your hopes up really high with me. Like, we're gonna try to work at it, but I cannot guarantee anything. We can't. We're just going to do what we can. And halfway through a process, they get defeated, deflated, and don't want to keep going. And that's with discrimination. A lot of cases, they're mostly discrimination cases, more than actual hate crimes or hate, like that sort of thing. But in general, when you're facing that over and over again, when a crime does happen, do you have a whole lot of, do you have a whole lot of confidence in that system to actually protect you, to keep you safe, to keep you from, basic safety? You don't. So people don't, they just stop, they move, they sequester themselves. And so we keep having these conversations, and hopefully some of it will get through, that there are people that want to fight for this, but we have to be really realistic to them that this is not an overnight process, and that there is, again, the reopening of those wounds, those trauma wounds. So.
I have a specific recommendation.
I just want to pause to allow folks online a space. Those of us in the room, it's very easy because we can feel the energy, but folks online, anything?
Not that I can, hold on.
Jen Philo.
Jennifer, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Listening to Sean, I've been a Vermont resident for about 25 years now, and I'm just really curious. We've had some really high-profile Black women essentially leave their respective places of residency and jobs in the legislature due to harassment and hate. And I'm curious, when Sean was speaking, if our legislature, what chance do our BIPOC residents have if we have not passed any meaningful or progressive legislation to make substantive changes. And I'm just really curious if anybody can speak to what Vermont has done over the last 5 years to make any progress when it comes to hate crimes, when it comes to the ability to report hate crimes, any meaningful laws that have been passed that basically will help with reporting, with any of this.
So, you know, I was interested in what Sean said for a lot of reasons, but one thing I think I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're not necessarily just talking about hate crimes, like something bad that happened because of who you are. I think I heard you talk about under-enforcement of the law when Black and brown folks are victims. And so that doesn't require any sort of new law. It's just people in positions like federal and state law enforcement and also police.
Speak up a little, sorry.
Oh, sorry. It requires law enforcement to use the laws that we have in a way that takes seriously the victimization of Black and brown people. So, you know, to address the comment that was just made, I think a lot of times there's not a new law that is necessary. I think we lawyers love over-processing stuff, but it's making the system that we have work for all people. Sean, I don't have a good answer to your question. I'm going to be frank.
It can't be one because they don't care. That's the only answer. They don't care because his body, well, maybe gone now, is dissolving in the water. And these people can't have a proper funeral for their children. And I can't tell his former teammates who call me from time to time what's going on. That's not trauma. That's trauma.
And while we don't know if it's a hate crime or what the circumstances behind it are, again, there was no investigation to find that out anyway. When you're in a state like this and a Black or brown person disappears, where do you think we're going to go with that? You know, white nationalists don't go out and publicize. You know, I just snatched. You know, they don't tend to talk about that publicly. But we certainly have a 400-year history that might implicate that there was some hate involved with that.
Thank you. I guess this is to piggyback a little bit off of what Jen Philo said, maybe, and Sean. One of the reasons I think you don't see maybe what you consider more private citizens show up at these forums or make suggestions or explain, or maybe what the hurdle is in reporting some of the discriminations is we see both on a hyper-local level here in Rutland as well as across the state, we see our BIPOC folks in leadership positions experiencing the discrimination and the injustices that our private citizens are experiencing, and they are not getting the support from their peers to kind of step up and enable and help and assist them be comfortable and safe to maintain those positions of leadership in our communities. And so it really, it's harmful, it's exhausting for those folks, and it really takes the energy out from under people to step up and speak up for themselves when they're seeing folks that they finally saw themselves in people in leadership positions that they connected with that aren't getting the support that they would want for their own experiences.
I want to turn really quickly to our friends on Zoom. Pam Whitney.
Yes, hello. I was a victim of a hate crime back in the early 90s. And yeah, I got punched in the face and coming out of a gay bar. Long story short, a bunch of people gave statements, ended up having to go to court, and I was the only one that showed up. And that kind of hurt more than getting punched in the face. You know, and nobody really cared to get involved in somebody getting punched because, you know, they were questionable sexuality at the time. So another thing I'm thinking is, as far as how we're going to deal with the fact that it doesn't seem to go away, is if we're going to teach kids about sexuality and all the different types of sexual you can be, I think we need to start teaching kids about restraint and common sense at the same time. If you want to be someone who's proud and you got your rainbow hair going on, they're going to draw attention to themselves. Negative attention is going to be part of that. So I think that you're going to teach them that it's okay. You also have to teach them how to be careful and to be smart about it. And also, I was thinking that, somewhere in middle school or maybe school, to maybe some sort of core requirement that kids have to spend time in might be an uncomfortable situation for them and have to get to know some minority person personally or some LGBTQ, et cetera. However that might be able to be accomplished in academics, a requirement for graduation or spend time with something that doesn't align with, how you live, what you're taught. And maybe it'll make a difference down the road for, somebody not getting punched in the face. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response from our folks in the service provider region? Yes.
Hi, Maggie Ingoli, Executive Director for the Rutland County Restorative Justice Center. Been trying to mostly just listen, despite the fact being a provider and also fitting within the BIPOC community. I think one of the things for me that I hear, and I'm going to jump off of Pam, is educating kids in school and catching this type of behavior when it's younger and kids are more malleable. And I just want to say that there are so many things, and I only can speak to Rutland County, that have just been egregiously mishandled as far as hate, race, etc., by every single system, including restorative justice, community justice, all of it, because there's no backing, there's no togetherness. I also want to speak to the education component. So we do a social emotional intelligence class where we teach children social and emotional intelligence skills and how to deal within those uncomfortable situations or situations where people are different, et cetera, et cetera. And we go to 10 to 15 is the age group we try to fit with that. We only have 4 schools buying into that, and we've been doing it for a long time, and it's not because we haven't approached them. And I just want to speak to that institution as well, and how this isn't a call out, this is a call in, where we have these resources, but people have to come and find them and dig them. And there's only so many times an organization with 5 people can go knocking at a school's door and say, hey, we have a free resource for you. A free resource where we'll come in and teach hours and hours and hours of curriculum of social and emotional intelligence, and no one will take that. And we do surveys beginning, and we walk with the kids through it. We have diversion that has not served LGBTQIA2S+ people of color, and I know that for a fact. We have people that have been so intensely affected, but the system doesn't support us going and supporting those people. Things have become political. And like, I'm over here an executive director of a 501c3, and I have to be careful about speaking my personal truth and like hate that's happened to me. And so it's one of those things where you have 2 sides of the coin, where it's like, I want my funding so that I can do all this work we're doing. We're serving over 300 people a year. But then at the same time, sometimes you have to hush about that. Or you have to make that smaller. You have to take this thing that's huge where people are being displaced and they leave their communities and they're re-traumatized over and over and over again, even in a system, because it takes so long. So long, and we recognize it. We recognize how long it's taking. We're working together to try and make it shorter. But like, in the meantime, it's one of those things that what do you do with all those people that fall in between the cracks and all those people that are hurting? And
we want to make it better. I've only been in this position for 4 months. And I walked in, I was the only person of color that was in ED in the entire state of Vermont as a 27-year-old woman, and let me tell you about uncomfortable. And thank goodness they just hired another Latino woman, and I was so excited. Which, doesn't that sound ridiculous? I was excited that they hired another person of color. And I'm sitting here watching this from both sides of that coin, where I recognize the system we're working in and what we're working against, and I'm working under legislative statute with multiple collaborators, and I'm also a person like living this life. And I think that that's not talked about enough. And then if I talk out, I'm seen as extreme. I'm seen as political. I'm seen as this, that, and like I'm here to say I'm not any of those things. I'm a person who believes in human rights. and I want everyone to have their chance. You know, and I know, like, I met with Ian, and Ian's been so fantastic with us working together, and I want to do more, and I want to be better for Rutland County, because it's not just me. And we need to serve all people in Rutland County. It doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, whether they're, you know, white, black, purple, green, and identify as a hippo. I don't care. I'm here, and I want to serve them. And I want to make sure hate is not happening anywhere, and people are not being disparaged in any form. And we are an in-between, but we are a resource that is intensively, I would say, underused, and it's not anyone's fault necessarily. It's just there's no way to understand or know these systems, and we're trying to figure out who's doing what. And it's challenge. And like the leadership on it is like, no one wants to take the lead role, because who wants to be that person? And who has that time when they're just trying to like we're a tiny organization, keep it afloat, you know? So I want to speak to that and recognize that, you know, restorative justice has been mentioned. And so I really believe that there is some stuff we can do, but there is an between what restorative justice can do civilly and criminally and what can just be done for prosecution. There is a huge in-between, and that's really where people are falling. I would say that's where a vast majority of hate happens. Thank you.
I think I need to speak up, sorry, unless you got something else.
Yeah, we have somebody
Susanna,
on the computer. Is it Susanna?
Yeah. Okay.
Sean and you.
Yeah.
Okay, Susanna, then you, Marcia. Thank you.
Yeah.
Susanna?
You're muted.
Disappeared.
All right, we'll come back to Susanna. Marcia?
Oh, she found it.
She found it?
her voice.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Susanna.
Sorry, I bagged when I should have zigged. I just wanted to go back to maybe 2 questions ago. I believe it was Jen who asked what's being done in the state. And I think that the first answer that was given was really appropriate. A lot of it is that we have the tools we need, and we just have to use them for, you know, aggressive good. But I think also some of the suggestions I heard about things like equity curriculum and workplace, and I just wanted to draw people's attention in case you didn't know or remember, the Racial Equity Task Force, a couple of people who sat on the task force are there in the room with you today, came up with 70 recommendations on 3 main topics. 1, systems of support that exist for people of color in Vermont. 2, hate crime prosecution. And 3, getting more representation of people of color in state service and in public service at all levels of government. And I think that it's worth going back to those because a number of them did culminate in a bill this past biennium that did not move. I don't know how many people were aware, H401 was in House General, and it had a lot of those recommendations in it already. We also had a couple on workplace, things like, you know, extending the statute of limitations to report discrimination and harassment, getting rid of the don't darken my doorstep provision. So a lot of these things were in the works, and they either didn't move or didn't make it across the finish line or what have you. And so I think awareness of policy is also really important because it's the difference between something passing or not passing is that we need more voices to say, yes, we want that. Then how do we do a better job of engaging the community to say, hey, this is a bill, you know, say something if you like it. So it's definitely on us to know how to do better at spreading that word, and also, you know, being able to be watchful of some of this stuff I think is key.
Thanks, Susanna. Marcia.
Marcia Castle, hello, Boer.
we invited you into the school. I'm here as a member of the community, as a member of NAACP, and also as an educator. And sitting here, I'm grateful for new reporting and for interagency collaboration and for the awareness that has come out of some of these fora in terms of trauma-informed practices. What I didn't hear, and until a little bit with the restorative justice folks, is that preventative, and Susanna's agency is doing as well. You know, it's maybe another echelon of that pyramid that maybe mingles with that community response. And the schools are trying. We are walking a tightrope on this stuff in terms of the public backlash. There are people who want to do this work crammed into the cracks in the curriculum, which you are also mandated to deliver, along with everything else. We are trying. But you also need to train, just like train your law enforcement workforce, you need to train your teacher workforce, you need to train all of your public workforces. We are trying to disrupt the pipeline so that there will be less reason for punitive measures. But we can't do that without support and without some humility. Because when your public officials are not willing to take bias training, you know, that's saying we know everything and we have nothing more to learn. And that's the message that we get from the outside. And we have to approach it with humility, whether we're the state's attorney or the FBI, or that we still have things to learn. And we're not just doing it, we need to take on what we're saying we want everybody else to do. And it may not be that schools don't want to take advantage of your services. We are burdened with a platform of responsibilities that we are mandated to deliver, from mental health to the arts to standards-based grading, and then it'll be published in the paper if we don't meet the scores nationally and statewide. And when we try to do this work, we get pushback because we're told it's not our jurisdiction. So it would seem to me, and we have an influence on young minds to open their critical thinking, but then they go home. And we're not enlisting the community in the preventative measures. Just like this building that we're in right now does a really great job. I have an amazing titanium hip because of the magic that they did in this. But when we turn to preventative work, doing it hand in hand with the punitive, investigative work, and we simply don't value that. We expect it to be free. We expect it to be done by volunteer organizations. And that is just as important as all of this sophisticated work that you're doing on the upper part of the pyramid.
So I just want to make note that it is now 7:28.
Oh, that was that.
Yeah, it does go fast. We said that we would close at 7:30, and Marcia, to your point, I think about this being the battleground over the Rutland Raven Raiders, and how does that change what people feel like they can come up and say when the select board, the Board of Aldermen, then oversteps their jurisdiction because they're so opposed to a small change like that. So when you wonder why people don't come forward in this community, you have that. We just had a major hate crime where somebody was murdered, a person of color. Thank goodness, almost thank goodness, that the person who did the murder was so belligerently blatant about their hate. Otherwise, who knows how long that litigation would take. So when you look at the Rutland region and you wonder why people don't speak up, me and my family were harassed out of here. Lisa Ryan was harassed out of her position. We have the Rutland Ravens issue. We have people being murdered in hate crimes. People aren't showing up because they see what's happening. And you can say all you want, oh, it's not our jurisdiction, that's not really our place, we can't do anything. Well, then don't wonder why people don't come to you. And it goes back to what this gentleman said about being innovative, being what was the word used? Transformative. Coming out of your silo to help the people who are literally dying in this community because they need it. And there's no one else coming to save anyone in this community. And people like Marsha are trying. Mia is trying. Sean is trying his hardest to keep people from fighting. But if no one is going to come and back them up when the people who are sworn to protect, the people who were voted in to try to protect this community can't even see that Raiders is racist, what hope does a mother have when her kid is called the N-word in school? What hope does an LGBTQIA youth have when they don't see themselves reflected anywhere? If that's what they have to protect them. That being said, I want to give it back to Sean for one last comment, and then folks are free to mingle. We've got plenty of samosas. I'm going to have Eitan close it out after Sean.
Just real quickly, there was a police chief who basically...
Sean, speak up a bit.
Speak up a lot.
There was a police chief, a Vermont police chief, right? Because we talked about, like, what can we do to kind of stop some of the stuff that we're doing, like the affinity spaces and all those things. I run an affinity space at the middle school. I also work at the middle school where there was a Confederate flag brought out, right? Also, you're working in the schools, you're doing these things, you get pushed back from that, right? So we're doing these spaces and we're getting chastised for it. Now, not only that, you got a police chief who gets up there and says affinity spaces is what's hurting everything. So that's another thing. So now this is law enforcement that you say to go to speak to get help. But no, they're blocking us. He's blocking again. The same police chief that let a white supremacist walk free, didn't arrest him, knowing that he had charges of violence against all people, and they just didn't do anything. They just let him go. So these are the things that's happening. And just like Tabitha said, no, these people, they're not going to come to you. They're not going to come to no law enforcement. So how do we get this done? I don't know.
There is a practical initiative.
You've got about 15 seconds, and then I got to hand it over to Eitan.
Are you aware of the Declaration of Inclusion?
Yes.
One of the problems the Declaration of Inclusion has, if they have 60 members now, one of the problems is after they go away, if Al Wakefield and his associates go away from making the presentation to the town, over 60 already, the town's very enthusiastic, but they don't know what to do. They don't know the tactics. What do I do? I'm in favor of this. I'm not a bigot. I'm not prejudiced. What do I do? So the idea, the concept we talked about, an organization like this can supply practical tactics to each of these towns. They always sign. They're on board. You're going to get more cooperation from them than you're going to get from any other town. Go to them, but they don't know what to do. They don't know exactly what to do. Let's tell them from our viewpoint. Let's stop complaining and let's tell them. These 60 and Al, who's an African American, are now making more. So eventually they'll get around to the 243 towns. But let's start with the 60.
So, question, who's not telling them?
Excuse me?
You said, let's go tell them. Who's not telling them? When you say,
I'm not hearing outside.
Who's not telling them what to do with the declaration?
Yeah, he's giving some ideas. He makes a declaration.
No,
and then right behind him is somebody, who's going to complain about something else. So he has a site. He has a site that has some ideas. And he was on my program.
No, I'm asking, I'm sorry, we have to go.
He doesn't get involved in the tactical thing. He doesn't understand.
But there are people.
That's another meeting.
There are people that are doing that, but we can have that discussion somewhere else.
So, lots of great stuff, and it is happening. People have been advocating, which is why everyone is here tonight. I appreciate all of the folks from our government offices coming out. I extra appreciate the folks who are coming on their own free will, their own time to share. Media, thank you for being here. Again, just remembering to be sensitive in your coverage, as usual, as you've been in the past. Eitan, finish us up.
Okay, from me, thank you to everyone. And one of the things that I'd like to do just to sort of round this out, but also to continue the conversation, is I want to bring you back to the questions that we started off with. And I would like you to, I would encourage you, invite you to think about the things that you've just said, that you've just noted, that are so poignant, and try to phrase it in those questions to see if there is some movement that we can in fact affect between this forum and another that will happen in the future. Tabitha, are those questions in some place that we can...
They're in the chat?
Easily... They're in the chat, yes, but in your room.
They're on my phone?
They're on your phone, all right. But let me just go through them. What's most pressing for you when it comes to creating a just community? What's getting in the way that the Attorney General's office could do? What experience have you had that you want to share? And you've done that. What do you want to know about these offices and how they can support you? There may be something that comes up after this forum, and it's important that you figure out how to get in touch with these people so that your thoughts are put where they need to go so they can do the be most impactful and full of effort. You've spoken about how bias and hate are impacting your life and community. But the last question, what would you like these offices to do about it given their scope of power and authority? That's another one to keep thinking about. That's another one that will probably occur to you at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I would encourage you, perhaps not to interrupt your sleep. Sleep is important. But I would say, make a note to yourself in some way so that you can get in touch with people. There are addresses coming up. I'm not sure how we do this in the room. I can put things in the chat. But it's important, yeah, they're already going into the chat here, but that Julio gave his address, Jules Torty gave her address. We've got to work on that because it is important that we continue to hear from you, not merely when these fora are taking place. Anything else, Tabitha?
No, close us out with your kindness, because you're really good at that.
Wait, what did I say? I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing you.
I said close us out with one of your kind things that you say, just a sentence or two.
Kind things that I say. I want to remind us all that as hard as it is to continue doing this, and I know that it is, it really feels like sometimes you have the memory of 400 years even though you've been alive for 30. I want to remind us that during the AIDS epidemic, one of the things that ACT UP said constantly is silence equals death. And those of you who were around in the 80s will remember that. And the reason we said that and said it over and over again was because we had to remind ourselves that even though this was hard and soul-crushing, we had to continue to be noisy, and we had to continue to speak out. So what I'd like to do is encourage you and thank you for being noisy this evening.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to close up. We'll keep the Zoom on for a few more minutes in case folks want to interact. Folks from the government agencies, if you want to come and just hover by the Zoom or anything like that to catch anybody in case they have questions, eat a samosa, please do. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, RRMC, for allowing us to use this space.
Thank you, Tab.
Thank you.